Hey Twitch, welcome back. We're live at the AWS Summit in London with Ettore Lessa. Hi Ettore.
Hey, how's it going, man?
That's great.
Good.
It's fantastic to be here with you. So what are we going to talk about today?
We're going to be talking about this new SAM CLI that we made of refreshments and some of the new cool features that people will definitely love it.
So let's take it back a little bit, back in the history.
Sure.
Can you, because maybe not everyone in Twitch or listening knows what we're talking about. So what is SAM?
Sure, absolutely. So if you can see my screen, SAM is the serverless application model. It's actually a superset of CloudFormation that allows you to build and design serverless applications in a much nicer and easier way. So think about CloudFormation, those bunch of lines. Actually, they get really compact now, and that's how SAM will simplify the development.
And when we talk about serverless application, we're talking about which services in particular?
So we can talk about, in this case, we're going to be using API Gateway, Lambda. There's a bunch of services that we can use. So in serverless, we normally talk about first Lambda and API Gateway. There's Dynamo for NoSQL databases. There's S3. There's a bunch of other services that complement that serverless applications.
Oh, great. And we're talking about SAM local. So what does it mean, SAM local? Because we're talking about developing application.
Absolutely.
Was that a problem initially to develop locally, or what?
Sure. So before SAM local, it was actually quite difficult to emulate Lambda locally or an API gateway in that case. So if you actually define your application using SAM, we could actually give you a binary, which we're going to show you live, and that will read your template, and we'll set it up Lambda locally, and also an API gateway to simulate the environment. So then you can test your local functions locally, and it also actually help you with your feedback loop, right?
Yeah.
Kind of it speeds that up.
Okay, so do you want to show what a SAM template looks like?
Sure,
and
of
then
course.
walk through a little bit what are the new features, what we're talking about?
Okay.
Can we share the screen?
Okay, so
Right.
let's see. So if you can see my screen, this is the official GitHub for Serverless Application Model, or SAM from now on. And there's a bunch of examples in here. So first I'm going to show you an example, and then later we jump to the CLI. So if I actually go to examples, there's a bunch of examples over here. So let's pick something at API backend. If I click on the template YAML, you will be able to see that this is actually a SAM template. The reason you know this is a SAM template compared to a CloudFormation is we have this first line over here, a second line actually, called transform. And instead of actually being AWS column lambda function, now you have serverless column lambda function. And all of those boilerplates that you need to do in order to set up API gateway, do the permissions to call your lambda functions and all this stuff, this gets so much more simplified in SAM. All that you need for SAM in this case, in this template, is you're actually saying, I want to have a Node.js function.
Right.
That's where my source code is. That function needs to access DynamoDB at a database.
And then the policy is a default policy that
That's
gives
right.
access to the Lambda function to access DynamoDB.
That's right. You can even customize that. We have examples that we can go deeper in this if you want. And then once you get the basics, the bare bones, you need to know how are you going to invoke that Lambda function.
Right.
So in this case, we're saying this event, actually we say API gateway will invoke this function as soon as you hit /resource /anything, like a REST API.
Correct. I see here we have environment as well. Can we talk a little bit about environment variables?
Sure,
What do you use
of
them for? Because I'm sure people are interested about it.
Sure, absolutely. So the environment variables are primarily the normal, let's say, configuration that you might need for your application. Think about login for your application, what level of the login you want to debug or something like this. Maybe you're using something like a KMS key for encrypting data, and you want to pass that data or a database connection string. All of these are actually our fair game, really.
That's great. I'm sure so some people are wondering, a template, why would we use a template? I know a lot of people like to go and hack around in the console. Should they really actually use a template? And I think yes, but what's your opinion?
Sure, absolutely. So first, if you actually do everything through the console, it's very unlikely for you to repeat the action. And if you ever actually have a new AWS account, or if you need to onboard new people to what you've just done, so in a repeatable manner, that becomes very difficult. Having a template, we're talking now about infrastructure as code. So we can actually launch this very same application into multiple regions, actually making it global. By the way, you have an article on this.
I do.
And you can actually reap those benefits of using infrastructure as code.
Yeah.
You simplify development a lot, and now anyone else that comes after you knows exactly what that application do,
Yeah.
and how is it called, and you can actually know exactly where is it deployed as well.
And so in the landscape, there are several kind of frameworks to support kind of the deployment of application. One of the most common, which I've used from the beginning, used to be called Joe and Serverless.
True.
And now Sam, we have a bunch of others, Sparta, and also Chalice and stuff like this.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about what they are for and why should people actually
Sure.
choose, and how can they choose?
Absolutely.
And
Because we
what do you
talk
think?
about so many frameworks and ecosystems. First, if you're actually very new to all this, there's an official page actually called Serverless. It's a landing page with a bunch of resources and actually all of those developer tools.
Can we move to the screen of Etor?
If you actually go to this page, you will see not only SAM, but all the ecosystems and people that we partner with. Serverless Framework is one of them. It's one of our partners.
Yep.
And then some customers actually want frameworks particular to their language. So that's why Chalice is one of them for Python, and we have Express for Node.js, and then Serverless Framework is a little bit more high level and language agnostic in that sense.
Okay, cool. So, do you want to make a little demo a little bit
Sure,
on
of
how
course.
things work? And,
Yeah, absolutely.
So can we share Etor screen, please, as well?
It should be that already.
I'm not sure if those screens are sharing Etor. I see.
Okay.
Can we get the? Okay. I'm not sure if we can see the screens of Etor. Hopefully you can.
If you cannot, we can set up a Chime conference and share with people on Twitch, and we can get it working.
Okay, but anyway, before I get an answer on that, we have already some questions. And what are use cases about SAM? So when should a customer use SAM?
Okay, so any serverless application that you're trying to define or trying to model,
Yep.
that's exactly what the SAM will help you.
Okay.
To actually model that application and understand who calls who and what is going to be invoked and how that application is going to be structured in the first place. Think about Git repository, think about your source code, and think about CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous development, and continuous deployment in that sense. So SAM is any application that you're going to build that's serverless, and also you can mix and match some CloudFormation resources alongside of your serverless application, and that should be a perfect match for this.
Well, and we talked a little bit about infrastructure as code. In AWS, we're using CloudFormation initially. How
right.
does SAM integrate or differs from CloudFormation?
Sure, absolutely. So if you're not seeing because you're seeing my screen now, if we go back to the templates, the difference in here is that this essentially is still CloudFormation. You can still see resources, a description, a parameters, a something like this. The difference in here is that the type it's something called AWS : serverless, and that simplifies what you need to pass in terms of properties, resources, and values to actually bootstrap all the applications that you need. Think about an IAM role for a Lambda function to have execution.
So it's an abstraction layer on top of the rest.
Absolutely. It's
Okay.
actually a superset. So it
Okay,
simplifies a lot. But that also means you can run both.
Yeah.
If we actually go to the template and examples, there's one that I created a few years ago called Encryption Proxy. If we open that one up, you see exactly what I mean. You see the outputs exactly like CloudFormation, and then at the bottom you see a KMS key. This is not SAM, this is CloudFormation
That's
resource.
CloudFormation. So you can actually put parts of CloudFormation, parts of SAM,
Exactly.
and then just deploy that.
So the customers that I tend to see on a daily, almost weekly basis as well, they actually use what they've learned about CloudFormation, the tools they built around CloudFormation, and SAM is a perfect match in that case as well.
That's great. So now that we have the screen sharing, can we move to what you were going to show about the different frameworks?
Sure.
And talk a little bit about the difference, the strength of one another, stuff like this?
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, we're going to get started with the news with the SAM CLI.
Cool.
So I already have everything installed, but if you're trying right now, just before, is AWS labs / AWS-SAM-CLI. There's an installation in there for you. So I've gone through this already. Now I'm just going to show you what the new features are going to look like and how you can start right now.
Okay.
So the first thing a customer would like to do is I never use Lambda. I want to know, how do I create my application?
Right.
How do I structure my folder, my source code and everything, right? So this is how we start. So if you actually do a sam-help, you'll see a bunch of commands over here. Let me increase my screen. And one of them that we're going to show off today is called sam-init. So if I do sam-init right here, we will be given an application already created for us.
That creates all the boilerplates for you to start working, right?
Exactly. So if you actually see my screen on the left-hand side, this is the source code that the SAM app has been created through init. You can see we have a README file with actually a bunch of instructions for you explaining what these files are for.
So the init created this Hello app, right? And then with all the different templates, a README and things like this. That's
exactly.
Great.
And actually that init simplifies a lot because it tells you these are the requirements you need. You need Docker installed for the local development. You need Node.js in this case, of course, but we can run for any runtime in this case.
Yeah, I'm a Python developer, so I can do this with Python
cool,
as
I'm
well.
a Python developer as well. Cool. So we're going to show Python a bit. So because Python, of course, is the best language in the world. I love saying this on Twitch, so sue me for that.
And I'm sure if Randall is listening, I'm pretty sure he's listening. He's probably dancing right now.
Cool. So if we go for the first one, install dependency, so you can get a feel of how that looks like, is if we actually go, oops, hang on, I need to go there first. Go to Twitch. Too many folders in my computer, right? So first we install the dependencies.
So now we are in the Hello World app, right?
Yes, I'm using Yarn, but you can use npm install, whatever you want. Right. And then as we install this, we actually can already do our API locally.
So you went really fast, but the Yarn or npm install, there's a config file where there's the dependencies. And when you run that command, it installs the dependencies locally so that you can actually then execute command, right?
Fair point. Actually, let's step back a bit. Let me show you. Inside your Hello World, what you have in here is an application, JavaScript. This is essentially your Lambda function. We're using Axios as a HTTP client library. Cool. And we're making a call to check IP.Amazon AWS, just to give you a sense of what it is. And then we are constructing our response, which is what API Gateway expects. This is the interface. And that's it, as simple as that. Inside the same folder, we have the package.json. Which essentially, it's what we just did. We installed the dependencies, if you're familiar with Node.js. Right. We could also run some local unit testing.
So here I can see the dependencies, right? Axio and the version of it.
Exactly. So what we just did was a Yarn or npm install that basically we look up these dependencies, install all of them, and then make sure that everything else should be ready to go.
That's good.
So now that we have this out of the box,
there's also a README file. Let's go.
Absolutely.
Because that's the first thing people usually forget to put in there.
Yeah, so the README file will give you how to install dependencies for each of these runtimes, how to start your local API gateway with Lambda function, how to run your unit testing, how to package, and even how to deploy it.
That's cool.
So if we run the command now, because we just ran it, you will be able to see we have a new API already run.
So now you executed SAM local start API, right?
Yeah.
And that mounted a Docker container?
Yeah, exactly. We're going to go back in a very few seconds. Let me just show you that it works. Fingers crossed first, right? So it works. We actually get a local API working.
That's good.
And
so that local API actually is totally local. It doesn't go to the internet, nothing, right?
Yeah.
So we have our Lambda function that is being tested locally, and that's one was a big requirement from customers, a big problem initially. How do we do local development and then development in the cloud? Now SAM local fixes that problem.
Exactly
right? That's right.
If we now try to decipher everything that we've just done, SAM local start API, you will see that we actually get the source code that's local. We use a Docker container that emulates Lambda runtime. That's quite similar. And we actually mount API gateway in the event that we defined. So if I go back and show you the SAM template we spoke about earlier, you will see that this is where Sam actually got my code, and he mounted that as a Docker volume. And then here in the event, you probably recognize there's a path called /hello, and that's exactly where some local actually tried to mount everything else.
That's great.
So if I were to change something called Adrian, and then I would try it again, I would be able to see there's a /Adrian now, and everything else should be able to work.
That's good. So I see that we are on port 3000. What's the story behind that? Is there like a lucky number for someone?
So I guess there's actually a lot of history in there. So Express for Node.js, by default we go for 3000. Yeah. And there, I think Flask in the past used to be 3000, sometimes 8080. Yes. So I think some people get confused with 3000, 8080, 1990. As long as it's a,
someone just made a decision.
High port, it works, right?
That's good.
Cool. So this is only to show you Node.js, but this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
So how do we get more of this? So if I do some init --help, let me just increase this. You see there's a lot that we prepared for you already. We give you a very fully fledged help that gives you more details about how you can initialize other applications using different runtimes, how you can actually use your own templates to initialize this. Right. And we're going to touch this later. And you can actually use GitHub to host your custom template. You can use Mercurial. You can use a zip file, or even actually local folder.
That's good.
So if we try this now for Python, obviously,
of course.
Right? So we're going to try for Python and give it a name. Let's say Python project. Now,
if you don't give a name, it goes back to the default.
And we already have it.
And then we have it, so that's why
we're trying to be smart here, right? So if we actually close all of this now, you will see that now we have a Python project folder over here, and then we have almost the same structure that we had before. The difference now, if we look at the README file, you will see everything related to Python only.
That's great. And there's the test, right, which is very, very important. We have actually boilerplates for test.
Exactly. So let's actually do this. Let's actually install dependencies and run a test to see if that works.
That's cool.
Cool?
Let's do that.
So first, we're just going to install all the dependencies and then do what we need to do.
And if there are questions on Twitch, if we go too fast, do pass the comments. We'll try to go slower or explain in more details.
Perfect. So for Python, we are using PyTest, which is a very famous library for testing Python applications. So first I need to install PyTest. So because this is the first time I'm doing it to simulate what the experience you're going to have, we're just going to go back in here. We install PyTest.
Okay, cool.
And now that we have our code already there, we're just going to copy this comment and see if that works.
All right.
And you see that passed.
That's good.
But the question should be, what is this test? What is this test looking for? What is the test doing it? Inside the test folder, for each of those runtimes, we give you a simple test to prove to you that Lambda doesn't change the way you're testing your applications. In fact, it's even easier. All you're testing is the output in this case. Right. So you see that I'm kind of mimicking what API Gateway will send.
Yeah, I see that,
And then at the bottom, you see I'm actually calling the handler as through the API Gateway event, and then I'm testing if the status code is 200, and if there's whatever. Let's say I'm trying to say something called hello universe, which is not the way it should be. If I try to test it again, it fails.
That's good.
So the cool thing about PyTest, obviously Python, you will see that it shows exactly what was the expected, and then
and people don't have to deploy inside the cloud and do iterative testing and stuff like this, which was a pain before, right?
Exactly. Absolutely.
That's good. It's awesome.
So that actually has for .NET, for Java, for Go, for pretty much everything. Actually, .NET was something that customers used to ask about. How do I do this in .NET? Most of the examples were about Node.js or Python and sometimes Java. But now we have a better story for you today, which is if we go back in here and we do exactly the same, and we say runtime .NET, and let's say .NET project.
Yep. It will do the same thing.
It will not only do the same thing, but you see how the experience looks like for .NET as well.
Oh,
so we are actually using .NET Core 2.0.
That's cool.
And I actually had to learn a little bit of .NET and actually enjoyed it now, which is pretty cool. It's not Python yet, but it's actually pretty cool. So if we actually go through the README file, you will see exactly the same, but now for .NET, just to show you how quick it is now to bootstrap something in .NET. So we're going to do a publish. So if you are familiar with .NET, we are essentially packaging everything up and installing everything where it should be. So that's it. We've done already. And now we can even do some start API again.
That's cool.
And that's it. We've got probably done in less than 10 seconds. And off you go. Now I have .NET also running locally with code structure, unit testing, and everything done for you as well.
And one common mistake that I often do is I forget to run my Docker locally, and then I get errors, right? So people need to have actually Docker running locally.
You need to have that.
There's some preparation before having SAM running locally. Can you show us quickly how to install SAM?
Sure, absolutely. So if we go to the SAM CLI,
Yeah. It's very simple, right? It's,
so if you go to the SAM CLI, you're going to see there's installation over here. And we try to capture as many details as we could. If there's something that's missing, please let us know. Open up an issue or talk to us. We're always listening.
Shout on Twitter to Etor.
Cool. So because this is a refresh, we used to be written in Go. We refresh to Python. We can talk that in a few seconds. Okay. We are giving you the instruction that if you already had that installed, how you can uninstall, and then you install using Python.
Okay.
So all you need to do is actually run this command, which I run already, and then you should be able to good to go.
That's good. All right, awesome. So is there any question on Twitch, or should we do some more demos? Should we do some more demos? You want to show the code actually?
Yeah, so let me share something interesting, at least for me, is actually one of the most exciting as well. And actually, big shout out to Jacob, Sanaf, everyone behind SAM CLI. They've done a ton of work on this. So if we go to releases, because in the meantime we're here.
And you show the commits still 16 hours ago,
yeah,
people were
you could
working hard.
Could see it. So again, shout out to everyone, Rebecca, and everyone else as well behind the scenes. You could see this is what we're actually adding. We added the SAM init, which we just shown to you. And we are, of course, we're explaining that now SAM local is now SAM CLI.
So is just a rebranding, a renaming, or is there something else behind? Or?
No, it's more about renaming, because SAM local used to be primarily just local development, but now that we added
we merged those, right?
We are merging those features and adding new features as we speak.
That's great.
So in this case, actually makes more sense to have a SAM CLI as an agreement. And of course, we changed from Go to Python, so that also brings a higher fidelity, because SAM, as in serverless application model, is written in Python. So the CLI wouldn't make sense to have Go and Python, so we kind of merged together. But more importantly, this is actually a super cool feature. We added something called validate.
Oh, wow.
I always made this mistake. All my live coding sessions, it's just like...
Are you talking indentation mistakes? Or
yeah, you know, YAML, and there's a bunch of other stuff as well.
Exactly.
So let's just use .NET as an example.
Yeah.
If we go to template over here, you see that everything else is actually over here, nicely structured. And by the way, the new SAM now takes globals into account. So if I actually were to do something like this, my application should just work just fine, and I can have multiple functions without repeating myself.
Okay.
However, if I try to do something like this, it is expecting an integer, right? So if we were actually do something called SAM validate, and actually wait for the action to run and do a validation, everything
So this goes to the cloud, there's validation there, or? Yeah.
Exactly. So different from the CloudFormation validate, we're now doing deep validation.
Okay.
We're actually checking against our own spec, nested, to see, is this a dictionary? Is this the right value?
Wonderful.
Is this a value that we support? So, and then when he finds in here, he actually says, well, specifically, the timeout is invalid. So now we have exactly a much better experience before you even create the stack, deploy the stack, and everything else.
So, I mean, the first question I have in mind, you need internet connections with that, right? To do a validation. If I'm in the plane, I can't yet do it, right?
Yeah, at the moment, if you notice, we're actually making a request to IAM to verify a few policies, a few things. But we're actually looking to see how we could possibly make this offline as well.
This is wonderful feature. I mean, validation definitely a big on the to-do list of what we had for many years. Right, people had trouble. I had a lot of trouble with double escaping in JSON for many years.
I was actually live stage yesterday, and one thing I did was something like this, and I essentially just added an indentation. And he ended up picking up the wrong runtime, and I couldn't figure out why. Yeah. So now with the SAM validate, this problem goes away.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I remember so many little mistakes in indentation that you can go crazy, right?
Absolutely.
There's a cool question from Flemon 1986. the structure of the template can get big, right? When you
Right.
have, do you have some tips how to make it more readable or how to structure it?
Sure, absolutely. So when you actually go to the SAM templates, one thing you're going to notice is that there's a bunch of examples in there.
Yep.
Most of the examples for now, actually not this one, most of the examples for now are not that big. As they start to get big, the idea that we tell you is anything that makes up your service, think about your application, your bounded context, right? Your boundary. Everything could be in a single template. So from there, you'll be able to logically see what your application relates to, talk to, intercommunicate to. If that goes beyond 200 resources, then it's where we're going to start splitting up into multiple stacks or templates. But that's almost unlikely. I only seen that in a very rare cases. One thing I could recommend if you haven't seen this before, especially if you're actually going to production, we have a white paper just on these pieces and much more. Every question you should ask yourself, am I ready to go to production? Am I ready to test this application? What about CI/CD? Am I doing that right?
Yep.
All of these questions and all of this stuff in more details, because we're not going to have time for today, is in that white paper that you're seeing on your screen. So go check this out.
There's a question from Flemen also 1986. And, but apparently we're running out of time.
We actually have 3 minutes,
We
so
still
we've
have
got to
three.
make sure we are.
I'm gonna get that question out. Is there an easy way to move one framework to another? What's your experience with that?
Sure. So I used to use Serverless framework as an example, for instance, and Serverless framework also has a plugin for SAM, which you basically can use Serverless framework the normal way you are probably used to it, for those of you who are using it, and then you can export this to SAM as a template, and you can take advantage of the SAM validate, SAM local, and
That's
all
great.
these pieces as well.
All right, cool. All right, on that beautiful note, and thank you very much for coming here and taking time to explain to our viewers what we're talking about and about SAM and all the cool stuff, init and validate. And stay tuned, and we'll come back soon.
Let me just make one more comment, if that's okay. I forgot something really important because you're watching and we are running out of time. At the bottom of this page, there's actually a Slack channel.
Oh.
Most of us are there. Come hang out.
All right, cool.
Right?
Sam Dev on Slack.
Perfect.
All right, cool.
That's all I have for today.
Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone.
Bye-bye.